I want to talk to you briefly about criminal justice reform. This is an area that the young Republicans here locally, but across the state, have made a priority, and rightfully so. I believe so strongly that criminal justice reform is a bread and butter, meat and potatoes issue for conservatives, for Republicans. I think we ought to care deeply about our criminal justice system in Texas. It's typically been an area that Republicans have been reluctant to talk about for a number of reasons, but you know, we're tough on crime, we're law and order. You know, I know people that would love to execute people who jaywalk. You know, I mean, it's like you break the law, you're going to, of course, kidding. I hope, Tom, you're not one of them, right? All right. It is, right. But, you know, we've always been that as a Republican Party, but increasingly what we've seen is a focus on life and liberty and the rule of law, and making sure that government works, that government is limited, and that's what we believe as conservatives. And when you see a criminal justice system, even here in Texas, that is increasingly out of control, that is increasingly growing government, that is increasingly restricting the life and the liberties and freedoms of people who in many cases did not commit crimes at all, I see this as an important issue for Republicans to speak out on. Over the past few months, I've been leading the charge on an issue that's been really near and dear to my heart, and over 80 Republicans in the Texas House, and over 70 Republicans, over 83 members of the Texas House, and then the majority of Republicans in the Senate, including the most conservative senators like Bob Hall, spoke out on this issue as well, and that was the execution of Melissa Lucio. You might remember the case, it was all over the news, and we posted a lot about it because we care deeply. And this case caught my attention. Of course, we have the death penalty in Texas for capital murder, and we've seen the rate of executions, the number of executions go down pretty substantially in recent years, and there's different causes for that. But I believe in capital murder, and I believe in the death penalty for the most heinous crimes. And okay, you're not waiting on me. Come on. When there's a criminal that's received a jury, an impartial jury of his or her peers, and has been convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death, and generally supportive of the death penalty. But Melissa's case, y'all, was just extremely concerning from the very outset of the investigation, through the trial period, through the appellate period, and then including on death row. She sat on death row for nearly 14 years. And luckily, the Court of Criminal Appeals agreed with us that she deserves a new trial. They, 48 hours before her execution date, stayed her execution. I'm not opining on it, never have opined on her guilt or innocence. I wasn't on the jury, and I'm not the judge. But as a legislator, I viewed it as our responsibility, especially as a pro-life conservative. I believe in the value of life, the protection of life from the womb to the tomb. Innocent life from the womb to the tomb. And we're going to fight. I believe it's imperative for us as conservatives to fight from the womb to the tomb for innocent life. And if there's even the possibility, what is that drink, by the way? Is that a milkshake?
Orgetta.
Oh, okay. Wow, that looks great. Looks like a huge white Russian in glass. So, y'all, when there's a possibility, not just a possibility, but a substantial likelihood that someone is going to be put to death by the state, and that person is innocent, did not commit a crime, then I think we ought to be willing and eager as conservatives to push the pause button. No one is harmed by pushing the pause button, and that's what we were able to do in Melissa's execution. And it was so interesting. As I started talking about this case a few months ago, it was risky for me. I talked to the governor's staff, the lieutenant governor's staff, and they were very reluctant to engage in this for various reasons. I understand the governor's reasoning for doing so. The lieutenant governor is kind of a different story. But conservatives were kind of, they were uneasy about getting involved in a death penalty case. This isn't something we've talked about a lot. The ones who were kind of charging the line with me early, in leading, were a lot of young Republicans, a lot of conservatives across the state, including some great conservative pro-life legislative colleagues of mine like Matt Schaefer, who came out and said, this isn't right, we can't do this. And as we started talking about it more and more Republicans started catching on and saying, yeah, we can't do this, it's the right thing to tap the brakes, like Mark Davis, the radio host in Dallas. Went on his show a few times, and when I first started talking to him, he was very reluctant. In fact, I think he was angry that we were getting involved. And then 2 months later, he was one of the ones leading the charge, saying we cannot do this. So there are other cases like that in Texas. There are thousands and thousands of inmates in our Texas criminal justice system who are locked up. In many cases, they've been locked up for a long time for nonviolent crimes, maybe some low-level drug offenses. Maybe they made a mistake at some point in their life. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they received lengthy sentences by, in many cases, overzealous prosecutors and judges who are not as equipped and experienced as Judge Novak here. And they're wasting away in prison when I believe very strongly if there's a way for us to restore them, to revive them, to educate them, to make sure that they pay their debt to society. If these primarily men, there's women too, but primarily these men can get back in their homes and become productive, profitable, tax-paying citizens and be fathers engaged in their kids' lives and not fall back into a cycle of crime, that we conservatives should not be waiting for the Democrats to lead on this. We Republicans, we conservatives who care, like I said, about life and liberty and the rule of law, and yeah, in some cases, second chances, we should be leading the charge. One of the, probably the most influential leader on criminal justice reform over the last 10 years was, you know who it was? Who's? Donald Trump. Donald Trump, in fact, one of the few bipartisan successes he had during his 4 years in the White House was when he was able to bring people together on the Second Chances bill. And what that bill does at the federal level is a lot of what I'm talking about doing here at the state level. So I know I've been long-winded on it, but if you're interested in this issue, if you ever want to go visit a prison with me, I believe very strongly that every state legislator...
Love to.
Huh?
I'll be your first volunteer.
All right, you should.
Second.
I would love to show you some of what I'm seeing with my own eyes. There's some really, really cool stuff that's going on in our prisons when I talk about restoring and reviving folks who deserve second chances. I saw that with my own eyes in the men's and the women's units. But when you go to death row and you see with your own eyes the fact that in the vast majority of cases, those men deserve to be there and they deserve to pay the ultimate the price for the ultimate crime, or the ultimate price, I should say. 23 and a half hours a day in solitary confinement for, in many cases, 10, 20, 30, in one case over 40 years. There's a reason they don't put death row in the middle of Dallas or Frisco or McKinney, because if people saw it with their own eyes, we would be more willing to engage in a conversation about whether this is really the way we want to do things in Texas, whether this is just or not. I don't have all the answers, but I'm not afraid of the conversation. And so I hope that you will. I know the young Republicans will join me on that, talk about drug reform as well, and policing reform. Civil asset forfeiture continues to be a huge issue that we're going to keep working on. And as chairman of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee in the House, I'm going to be leading the charge on that. I invite you to join me. So with that, we're also, we're working on property taxes. We're going to hold the line on our Second Amendment liberties, on the right to life, and we got to win in November 1st. And all of the legislative victories, this will be the last thing that I'm saying, and I'll take your questions and comments, all of the legislative victories that not we have achieved, but that you, the people, have achieved in recent sessions. Constitutional carry, the nation's strongest pro-life bill, the heartbeat bill, cracking down on CRT, the sanctuary cities bill, election integrity, all of these great measures that you have secured for the people of Texas are, every time we go into session, at risk. Every time. And so we have to continue to stay on offense. We have to grow our party, grow our movement, talk about what we believe and why we believe it, and get ready to crush the Democrats, the progressive radicals in November, because they're not giving up. They're going to still come for us, including here in Collin County. And you're on the vanguard of preventing that from happening. So with that.